All right. Hello, hello. Hey, Justin, what's going on?
How are you, Gabrielle? It's good to see
Um,
you. It's
nice
Friday
to see you as
somewhere.
well. Yes, nice to see you as well. Welcome to the SDR Hotline. This is episode 8. Um,
Nice.
yeah, so I've been doing this for the better part of like 2 or 3 months now, and I'm really excited to have you on as our first guest of 2021. How to get like the sales futurist, the cyborg, onto here.
It's great. People, when I show up on camera now, they kind of say, "Hey, where's your makeup?" Um, can you, where's your stylist? Start peeling my skin back and actually wearing. I took a Zoom call with someone in Australia, and he has a whole Superman thing, and he wears a Superman costume on every Zoom. I couldn't believe it. He got it. It was a really good, full Superman top. I'm like, I got to up my game.
And we're going to show pads. They're a kind of customer conference. Not last year, but the year before. I forgot what it was called. My bad, sorry. But their CEO came out in like a Transformers costume. So I think there's like a theme for every year. I think it was a show pad transform. So that makes sense. But yeah, I was like, wow, like we have a CEO on stage giving a little keynote in a full-on Transformers costume. This is awesome. So I'm loving it.
Amazing.
Well, I think maybe just to start off, because anytime I share your name, someone's like, "Oh, the guy with the cyborg face, like the Terminator photo." But like, would love to just hear from you, like what do people need to know about you? How would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I, have been in sales for 20 years. It's cool to be your guest because I just turned 41 and I started when I was 21. So I've got the full 20 and I've sold everything. I mean, from information packets, to shoes to, gosh, I don't know, all flavors of SaaS. I've raised a lot of money for charity using software as a service, and I work for Salesforce and LinkedIn. And over the years, I just became a real tactical practitioner of what are we actually going to do the job of sales as a verb. So I got very enamored with tech stacks and email systems, and not just the methodologies in sales books, but the tactical ways of subject line A/B testing and tech stack A/B testing. And that's what made me think, well, this whole AI and ML revolution is coming. And, why is it bad? Is because we're amplifying, we're weaponizing and mechanizing the funnel. Are there ways to use this tech and actually do it humanely and make it artful and smaller batch personalization and deeper A/B tests? And what would be the most sophisticated way to use this technology with a great old school pedigree of like we talk about Miller Hyman, strategic selling, strategic closing. If you took someone with a lot of strategic experience and then loaded them up with the new tools, what would be the more ethical way to use those? So you are getting some of the efficiency gains, some of it, but you're not just spraying and praying. So I was a VP of sales in some SaaS companies and consulted, I think at this point over 100 startups on cracking the top funnel. And it was a mixture of my own consultancy and working for a VC-backed company that this is all we did. It's called Outbound Works, which was really fun. And so, yeah, I just turned 40, launched my own consultancy, decided to write a book. It got picked up by HarperCollins called Tech Powered Sales. And it was called TQ originally because if you release a book on tech stacks, guess what? In 2 years, it's an irrelevant book. So we're reading at a speed, where, right, like Gong is leading, but where will Gong be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Like it may be part of another company. So I wanted to isolate as a researcher and an author is what are the skills that help human beings learn technology?
Yeah.
The technical quotient, like there's IQ, EQ, and then this TQ thing. Some people call it AQ, adaptability quotient, but at some point there's a human and a UX or UI, and there's buttons and there's an interface. Like when you learn to use Gong or learn to use Outreach or SalesLoft, and there's a learning curve. So could I write a book that talks about how to embrace the learning curves of all the platforms so in 5 years it's still relevant? That was my big idea for the book. So that's kind of how we got to know each other. I've created a Discord server. I have these micro communities. I'm, open source training 1,000 reps, and I'm doing way too much, I'll be honest. But you kind of have to reinvent the wheel, So
No, I think it's I mean, we've gotten to know each other over the past maybe like 5 months. And I feel like it's been in like the past 2 or 3 months where we've had like more one-on-one conversations. And and how to put this, like there's no box on like what we can talk about. We can talk about technology, we can talk about personalization and relevance and differentiation, and like, hey, how can we introduce practices being used by like academic teachers in the context of sales, all the way to, hey, like, let's talk about what's happening in our world, right? Whether that's you and what you've experienced growing up as what we call like what a white guy, right? Compared to my experience now. And I turned 30 in December, like working in sales as a Black woman, and what are the experiences like, and having those conversations. And then of course, right, the theme of today, or the conversation of today, isn't completely, rooted around the events of this past week on Capitol Hill, but it's more so just reflecting on, I think, more so on a universal level, right? Like there are disagreements, right? There's almost this denial of things happening. And what we see kind of proliferate from there is, what's the word they used? It's not an insurgency, right? But, just basically kind of just going against the rule of law. So I think the question here that we don't have to have a direct answer or correct answer to this, is like, with how to put this. I think with what I see with you is you're always wanting to like push what we can do, like get out of our comfort zone, and again, like optimize, enhance, and like see truly like what is like the human potential that we can have and manifest in the context of sales. And so I just wonder, it's almost like, how can we get outside of our comfort zones? How can we disagree but still stay aligned in this pursuit of growth and in this pursuit of enhancing who we are as salespeople, right? And then potentially that can help us learn how can we interact in a way outside of the professional context to enable growth at a more universal level.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think of great leaders and mentors. When I worked for LinkedIn, I had a leader named Alex Wolin, who, some listening, he's at Slack now. Really good company culture. We used to say, what's the beginner's mind? Let's approach this from the beginner's mind. And I just feel like that's this great, because ignorance is bliss, and we can't learn if we know everything. So every day, the more and more I research, and I love how you mentioned academic papers, because I'm pulling from science and physics and all these interdisciplinary modalities for B2B sales. Why? It's like, why not? I mean, we have these chaotic systems of human beings, and there's gridlock, and there's dysfunction, and there's persuasion, and there's politics within your business deal. Like, the most likely thing for a business deal is they don't do anything, the status quo, that do nothing, right? So understanding the human mind and psychology is key, and how to motivate people and how to grow. So I think of the principle of a beginner's mind. I think of a growth mindset. I mean, I think about compassion and empathy and patience, and a lot of things that allow the civilized world to be civilized. And we're not really seeing that reflecting right now on a global level.
No.
But there's a microcosm and macrocosm. There's things to learn. So, I mean, just like we want to become customer-centric as organizations, we really want to become servant leaders and listen to people and be open internally to other ideas. And
yeah.
Diversity is critical. And, Nikki Ivy, she had this awesome thing where she said, I wanted to say, how can I be more of a supporter of diversity and inclusion? Like, how can I be the change that I want to see in the world, versus just, yeah, I support it. It's when you get interviewed for a company, ask, what's your diversity and inclusion policy? How are you hiring for diversity and inclusion? And if you get crickets, well, that's fine. But if 100 people who hear this ask the question, you start to put some pressure on these organizations to think about that. And that's something I love about Gong and can call out, is like, I feel my perception is like a real diverse hiring profile, and there's talking about it and doing it. And so kudos to Gong for, whether that was intentional or not, you're kind of modeling the SaaS organization of the future, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, how to put this? I was reflecting on that, because there have been conversations that I've had with other folks who, people I don't work with at Gong, and I share a message, right? And it's more so like kind of a moral, philosophical message. So for example, getting into sales, and it's like, hey, we need to recruit more, let's say, Black people into sales. And the conversation goes something along the lines of, the way that we can get people in is you can make a lot more money, like let's flex on everybody. And I was like, hey, you know, there can be something bigger, something greater that we can talk about here. And I had even shared an example of how someone had gone through the interview process, gotten to a VP level person, and just shared, oh, the only reason why I'm in here is for money. And that was actually a turnoff for that VP. And so someone's like, hey, listen, Gab, what you need to recognize is that Gong is much different than really any other organization, or you know, the leadership at Gong might be inherently different than other leadership who's very much like, hey, we need salespeople who are just money motivated, who are just going to chase that dollar, chase the carrot stick, the end. And if they have the money, if they have a path towards the money, then everyone's going to be happy. And I'm very much like, I don't know if that's true or not. Like that hasn't been my experience anyways. But this kind of like, my thought here is, it's like, all right, I might be in a company that is an example, that could be an exemplar of an incredibly healthy, growth-oriented, where you're able to learn, able to give feedback. So it's like, that's the experience, and you can innovate at such a faster pace. And that's a reflection of our leadership. But I'm like, all right, I'm here, but I know a lot of people who aren't in those kind of environments. And so because I'm okay, like, I appreciate that. I'm grateful for that. And I also recognize that there's still so much work to do. And it's almost like, how, I think this maybe gets to another question. It's like, what can we do in order to actually make an impact? Like, what is our own individual ability to drive change? Well, that's for ourselves, right? But also for others around us.
Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting is I really do believe like the leader is the culture in a way. So it's really great for leaders. I mean, who you choose to work for is critical. I remember when I interviewed for Tune.com in Seattle, the first thing I said to Peter Hamilton, the CEO, is I said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, which is the Peter Drucker quote. And it's really true. It's, you know, you have the people, the product market fit, and the upside, and you can have amazing product market fit and amazing upside. People can be making a lot of money selling, but if it's toxic and you're in a snake pit, right? That's like the old adage, like, if you're in a hole, stop digging, you know? And so leadership is critical, but now we do have servant leaders in place in tech. And so, you know, you're influencing the culture at Gong just as much as leadership. So it's like you chose them as much as they chose you. And now you have this dialogue and collaboration to grow toward the future. So I would really see, I enjoyed some of the principles of Tony Hsieh and holacracy, or what we see with Ray Dalio with the idea meritocracy, where it's less bureaucratic and it's less hierarchical, and there's more of a growth mindset where a lot of times now when I'm selling SaaS or helping people sell it, I'm amazed because the leader says, you know, I might stamp this thing, but I want my team to be happy. Can we get them all in another demo?
Yeah.
You see this when you go into a Slack sales cycle against Teams, or you go into a Zoom against Blue Jeans, against, you know, all the video conferencing. A lot of the SaaS per seat products now are determined by the consensus because the leader cares. Well, we have to look at that culturally as well. And I've been in some great cultures. I had an amazing time at Salesforce. I thought LinkedIn had one of the greatest cultures that was actually highly diverse, highly self-aware, self-actualized. I remember like I'd be working too hard and selling, and it was like, hey, Justin, like today's self-care day. It's Friday. You should think about doing some yoga or just some mindful meditation. I'm like, I'm getting paid to do this. This is amazing, right? You know, I mean, versus the traditional warlike culture of like attack.
Yeah.
You know? So I think some of that's good.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I'm stringing this along. This also 100% supports this. How to put this? I've said this so many times. I was like, you have to like vote with your feet, right? Sometimes you have to communicate with your feet. And if you're in an organization, like if you're choosing an organization just as much as the organization is choosing you, like you're choosing that leadership just as much as the leadership is choosing you. It's like you have, it's really, how to put this? It behooves one to understand what one needs out of leadership and to be fully accepting of whatever it is the leadership is doing. And if that leadership doesn't align with what's in the best interest of the individual, and then it's up to the individual to make decisions to put themselves in the best like environment possible. I know I've been in I've been in situations where I was like waiting for somebody to change, waiting for leadership to change. And that never happened, and I suffered for it. And so now I'm very much like, I constantly ask myself the question, like, what is it that I'm really needing in my from my environment and the people that I'm with, right? And the leadership who's really informing and influencing what the culture looks like in order for me to actually bring out my best self. So I'm just curious because I'm mentoring a lot of people right now too, and like this who are early on in their careers. Maybe they've been an SDR for no longer than like 8 months, if that.
Yeah.
And so and maybe I think you are too. We've had conversations about this, which is really to be discerning about where you go and like questions to ask. And so I think the question I want to ask to you, it's like, what advice would you have for people to, whether that's questions that they should be asking, research they should be doing, to really get a full understanding of what the leadership is like at the organizations they're interviewing at or that they are a part of?
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone says to check Glassdoor, and that's important. Lee Bartlett wrote a book in UK called The Number One Bestseller. It was less about hubris and ego and some of the ways he would interview companies. He'd try to figure out the product market fit. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done this in a job search, but did you find people that left the company that no longer sell there or market there? And did you talk to them candidly and find out the culture and what is the leadership like and what's the culture really like? Is this a bro culture, right? Do we know? I mean, is it diverse? Are they really a fixed mindset where it's really just there's one leader who's just sort of king or queen and it's just deciding, and there's really it's secretive or quiet. And I'd encourage everybody to see talks from Ray Dalio and read Principles, just because he's built systems that try to break bureaucratic operations. A lot of the politics in companies are the hierarchies keep people from speaking to each other. We'll dovetail into this. What can you do to be empowered? Even talk to the customers of that company and see what the experience is like interacting with them, the support, and you could do this passively looking at G2 Crowd, passively looking at Glassdoor, back channeling through LinkedIn, taking a little extra time. I know it's hard. I know we're in this pandemic and it's like jobs are scarce. You're just kind of like, I got to just take the job. I'm a grinder. I'm going to go anywhere. Empowering yourself to maybe realize that it is a two-way street and you're picking them as much as they're picking you. And this gets us into a really interesting conversation about how SaaS is even designed, right? So an average SDR or AE who's good will generate millions of dollars for a SaaS company, and they'll make a fraction of that. And even if they have stock, they'll make a fraction of that. So being awesome at SaaS is enriching someone else, and that's a fact. And that's okay, because soon, what you can do is rise up in the organization to a VP, CRO, a CEO, start your own company, learn all that. The American dream, you can go out, start your own company, raise money. So I'm not fully challenging the system, but I have been writing about how we're all in this grand matrix design. Software as a service, sales, marketing, operations is 20 years old. It's from 2002 when Salesforce and Cisco simultaneously hit a $50 million run rate. That's going to make everyone's head explode. But that's when the cloud and SaaS came together 20 years ago today. There's not much change in the design of the roles and the organization, right? So it's like the human eye sees a million colors, but when we sell things, we have SDR AE. There's two things that a human can do. How do you play Moneyball in bowling? You throw the ball at the pins. You play Moneyball in baseball because you have 9 positions. It's a complex system. Like the game of Go, there's millions of permutations. So my whole thing lately has been, you have a human being who's come out of university. Their parents saved their whole life to invest $50,000 to $200,000 in this education. We take this amazing, bright person and we go, well, you could be SDR, crunch this spreadsheet. It's like menial work that we can easily automate with a machine.
Yep.
My whole thing is when I started in SaaS, I got entire training, closing, opening, websites, webinars, product knowledge. I was the CSM. I was doing it all. And maybe it's not predictable revenue. It's not efficient, but the factorization of human beings never really works out. The first industrial revolution when you just make hubcaps all day. It just not very humane for the humans. So what I do is I love what Aaron Ross says now about unique genius. You have a person that joins your organization.
Yes.
What did they study in college? Oh, they're a great communicator. Well, give them a podcast or give her a YouTube spot. Maybe they have aptitude with statistical analysis. Move them from Excel to SQL. Maybe they have aptitude for code. Pay for them to take some classes to do R and study data science. And like, look at every human who joins and create either a 20% time or a learning stipend to say, how can I optimize this hire? Not, here's our SDR requisition, hit 22 meetings a month and 11 opportunities. And if you do it long enough, you can become an AE.
Right.
What's causing all the breakage? And what's actually causing the breakage and the churn is a lack of humanity in the definitions of these roles. Because it doesn't matter how many times you move the meeting metric, the opportunity metric, the incentives, the cultures, the gongs, meaning like the actual ringing the bell and the motivation. What it really is, people are inspired, that are mission driven. They want, human beings they're artists and they're creators, and they don't do well in a factory. So I think is we should shatter the acronyms, look at the gifts and strengths of each incoming human, and then align them across the entire revenue chain, across marketing, ops, and sales. And that's truly Moneyball. A crazy idea. I've only ever seen one author talk about it, Justin Roth-Marsh, a book ironically called The Machine, which is my nickname. And maybe I'm crazy, so I have this really human message and a robot, but I love paradoxes, and I like people to underestimate me. I want them to come in and think, this is Skynet. Like this guy's really bad for sales, and then you hear what I have to say, and maybe it's a human-centric message.
Yeah, I will say, when you're like, oh yeah, cyborg, Salesborg, whatever, I was like, I think Justin is actually a robot who is performing as a human and really plays into it, so that we just like don't accuse him of being a actual robot. So no, I think that's a beautiful message. And I mean, it kind of even goes with like, there's this question that I was asking myself the past 2 days, which was, what is it? It's just like, how can we like accept disagreement, right, and stay aligned? It's like, what does it take to have a future together? Then there's this piece here that you're talking about, which is like re-inject the humanity into what we're doing today and what we'll continue to do moving forward. I'm curious, like, it's almost like running a discovery on this. It's like, what is a challenge to that? Like, what keeps us from actually being able to see this being put into action?
So it's really not easy to change these systems, right? And when we give people the ability to do automation really quickly, there's a laziness factor, because you just want to load the template and press send and send out 500 emails. It's so easy. It's like it's like the hand in the cookie jar. It's really hard for someone to pull back and say, even though I have this Canon, how will I responsibly use the Canon?
Yeah.
Even Gmail has speed limits, and so I think one of the big things is with greater power becomes greater responsibility, right? And I think I will make a political comment here. Leaders have a powerful ability to influence. Some lead and some follow. So be careful what you ask your followers to do. I'm always cognizant of this. So even in my book, there's a warning. There's like a disclaimer in my book, like, creed, like a creed. Like, we believe in small batch. We believe in personalization. We believe in measure twice, cut once. You got 5 hours to do a sequence, A/B test, 100 contacts at a time, then scale to 1,000. So I really want to give people this cautionary tale that the new tooling and the futurism of what we're all doing with what I call the SDR AE industrial complex, there's a lot of heart and care and authenticity that needs to be poured into it to de-sterilize the tech component. So I think the first decision is awareness.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, I've been in sales for 6 years, right? So I mean, even like me being an SDR back in 2015, like there was no sales loft, no outreach. I think we had inside sales, which is now Zant, I believe. Like Connect and Sell was there, but it was kind of like I feel like heavier technology. Wasn't quite as quick, wasn't quite as fast, or wasn't quite as much automation. Like if anything, HubSpot had released like HubSpot Sales or HubSpot Pro, whatever it was, and it was more so just campaign. You can actually go in and adjust the content within those sequence or those threaded emails. So you just had like you had your entire sequence, you had to check it, right? And then you send it out and you hope that everything works out afterwards. But like I think like the piece that was there initially, right, when it's like, right, hey, we can first now introduce automation within the sales context. It wasn't so that you can spray and pray. It was just more so, hey, like there's an ability to create. And if I can, it's almost like if I can think less about which buttons I have to press and start distributing more of that energy towards how can I be more creative? How can I learn more? How can I develop that much more business acumen? How can I be more relevant? Like that was the piece. Then like that's what technology can really provide to me. So in that environment, right, I had a lot of agency. I had a lot of autonomy as a frontline sales development rep. I haven't yet been in an organization where it's like the typical, I think, like churn and burn, like, you know, it's just a smile and dial factory. But I recognize that those environments exist. So I'm almost wondering, it's like, what is a conversation to have with someone who's like, hey, you just need to hit 100 calls a day. You need to send out a bajillion, like they're working on capacity models.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, how can you have that humanity within a capacity model or capacity mindset?
I don't know what the case is. I see myself as a person of privilege. I am white looking and I'm 6 feet tall. I don't have a college degree, but I have all the things that came with a college degree. I worked for amazing companies and I got rejected a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I just Coca Sexton, who's a veteran, and he's Coca Sexton. He kind of invented and coined social selling at LinkedIn, and yet his resume gets rejected. But what I love, and I want to give great credit to organizations like Salesforce and LinkedIn who hire sellers on merit and no longer enforce the college degree algorithm that spits them out. They look at everyone now, and I love that. And I think that's the future. This is a trade skill. You can't learn to base jump or heliski in a book. You kind of have to, do it and have training. So, what I was going to say is that I've had a certain level of autonomy. I'm 100% Jewish of origin on one side, so it's just I want to share that with the community because growing up, it aligned me to an experience that was maybe unique, and I got to have a flavor, maybe some flavor. But as far as in software as a service, no matter what team I led, I talked to our CEO nearly daily, weekly, So if you're in a company, it may just be really big and you can't talk to CEO. I'm not saying you have to have this, but if you're running an SDR team, a sales team, a marketing team, and it's become so bureaucratic that you can't speak to the top or have check-ins or one-on-ones or 360-degree reviews, that could be problematic.
Yep.
And I also want to really encourage the C-level and startups to flatten these silos. And this is something Jack Welch used to do. He'd go down to the shop room floor. And I know Jack Welch, it's love him or hate him, it's polarizing this and that, but he'd go down to the factory floor and shake the hands. And this was in an era with vast hierarchy. But this, for me, is like the revenue engine is really important. So I foster a really good relationship with the chief marketing officer and the chief executive officer. I pinged them on Slack. I remember one year, actually, I can probably share this. I'll say the company, but we got Slack in the company, and Slack contacted us and said, the number one user of Slack in your entire company is 350 people is Justin Michael.
I'm not surprised.
I'm going CTO, all like thousands of messages over this weekend because trying to build this product. We integrated this other company, and because I had sold this tech, they were trying to do all this product feedback. I think it was like Sunday night. He comes in, he's like, I'm talking to this solution consultant, sales engineer, and the CTO. CTO is like, you guys are the most annoying people ever. And we were like, okay, but he's like, but I love it because it was so relevant to this product we're trying to hash together and get the feedback and what we to do. Because I was selling mobile technology for 14 years and encourage people to have the courage to look past your station and your limitation, foster mentors within your company, and break down silos. And if you start interacting with your C-levels and they start pushing back a lot, maybe that's not the culture for you.
Yeah.
Look at Tony Hsieh. He's down on the floor having a party with everybody. He's accessible, right? He's celebrating life. So I really love when leadership is on the floor. My friend Amir Ryder, who's the CEO of CloudTask, has a center in Medellin. He's always down there. He'd always be on calls. And he's sitting in line with the agents. He's making cold calls himself.
Yep.
He's the CEO. What does that say? They all know him. I know Amir. Like everyone in the company has a personal relationship with the CEO. Why not? How much extra time did that take? Now, it's a little harder remotely now. You might have to cluster, scrum with the marketing folks. But yeah, if you're a leader now and you're siloed out, hold like a town hall. It was kind of cool. Like Jeff Weiner did this at LinkedIn. He'd hold these awesome monthly meetings, and everyone would show up from every office in the world. And he'd bring people up on the stage and share stories, and we all felt close to the leadership, even in this massive company. So I might have gotten totally off the subject, but these are some.
Okay, I was here for it though. I'm gonna how to put this. Yeah, I've worked at organizations where the CEO was often their ivory tower, like completely removed. And even in that, how to put this, if decisions are being made from an isolated place, then you run the risk of those whatever choices are made, whatever decisions get put through, of those being completely irrelevant in an ill match to the current situation. So I've seen that backfire for everybody, leader included, so much so that they isolate themselves so much that they become irrelevant to the company. So there's a risk. It's not beneficial for the individuals, but it's also not beneficial for the leaders either. I want to backtrack a little bit because there was something we were sharing around, the unique genius. And Devin has a really great question, which is, number one, do we see a world where individual SDRs are measured differently? And then I think the second piece is, how do we, what does it take almost to honor the varying strengths that individuals can have, right? Versus trying to put them into some cookie cutter. You have to follow this one model, the end, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I think we really all have to challenge as a community is an SDR too limited of a definition. That's where I almost would want to instill a novel 20% time to SDRs. It worked for Google. My brother's there. Imagine if you take a great rep and they want to do some content marketing, or they want to go and sit on the revenue team and learn RevOps this month and teach me how you're building reporting in Salesforce, or let's go look at some different AI platforms, or hey, we're doing this special set of webinars, and letting people cross train instead of, oh, you only have 2 years of SDR experience, you're not ready to be an AE. Well, now you have 4 years of SDR experience, you're the best SDR, but you've never been there to close. So I'm sitting there training an SDR, like boot camping for a month, so that they can be thrown into AE. Well, shouldn't the organization been doing a rotational program where all the SDRs are doing AE and doing marketing, and we're taking, if this is really our bench, if you want to take the current system, what are the gifts of an SDR beyond the limiting description of the silo? Because they're the leaders of tomorrow. If you get really good at selling stuff, that's the core CEO skill. What is it that Jack Dorsey has? So he can be the CEO of Square and the CEO of Twitter. He's a master salesperson.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not sure he's like some phenomenal coder or engineer or architect. I mean, a tweet is a good idea, right? The concepts for companies are a pretty garden variety. Remember the social media wars? I mean, at the time Zuckerberg came out, I remember there's Friendster, there was, hundreds of social networks, but who won? Another controversial topic, but it became the execution pieces, who could sell it the best, get the right VCs behind it, build the community, seed the exclusivity, right? So we're coming back to people that sometimes feel powerless and they can't change the system. Now, if you speak up a lot in the company, what happens is sometimes the SDRs get managed out because they speak up. Yep. And then it really starts to feel like the first industrial revolution or something out of 1984. It's like, I'm in a company, I can't say anything. It's fine. Yeah. That's about selection, like going into a company and feeling like when you interview the other reps that left, it's like, was your voice heard there?
Yep.
Feel like you were an equal? Were you treated with respect? Were your ideas and pushback at least implemented, at least said, we're working on that? I've been in companies where I had an issue with the commission structure and we changed it. I have been there and I affected change, but I'm one of these octopus employees where I have diplomatic skills and I'm like, yep. I'm running this little revenue division, but I'm like, I have relationships at the C-level within the company because I never saw myself as beneath someone that had a lot more experience. I looked at them as a mentor, and that's where I'm going to go. So I also encourage people as they look in their career to see themselves to be inspired by the leadership, to foster those relationships, and understand that you have gifts coming in as a first-year SDR that maybe your C-level does not have in
Yep.
some other area. So I think there's a lot of limiting beliefs that happen. It's almost like these are the grunts
Mhm.
of the organization. So this kind of long-winded answer. I mean, we need to change some of the systems, the fundamental systems, and figure out ways to make the SDR and AE roles better. I can tell you what I think is going to happen
Yeah.
in the next 5-10 years, and how this is all going to change, if you're interested.
Yeah. Well, real quick, because I do want to know, but there's a, is it Lao Tzu, right? Where it's like, thoughts become words, words become actions, actions, right, become habits, habits become your nature. There was something when I was reflecting on this, I thought about, well, where do thoughts come from? And there's something you had mentioned, right, which is like, we have to challenge the limiting beliefs. So like my thought was, all right, my thoughts are probably going to be informed by whatever belief I'm holding as an individual. So in going into an organization, if you have leadership who believes that someone who just happens to occupy, like there's a difference between like just being an SDR, like that's your identity. This gets very Sandler-esque, right? And being a person who's occupying the SDR role. Right? It's like, this is a temporary place. This is a place of development. It's a place of learning. It's a place where you can express yourself. It's a place where you can start to explore. It's like within this SDR, like we're not expecting you to stay as an SDR, but I would love to see what your full expression of yourself is within this role. And in that, you're able then to explore other opportunities. So, I think Devin, if I were to, like quickly sum up my answer to your question is, number one, it all starts with leadership's beliefs around sales development. Like for me, I was an SDR. But I didn't become an SDR because I wanted to be a salesperson, right? Like I was like, I want to be a CEO of a company, some way, shape, or form. I don't know what that is, but I know that a lot of CEOs start their career in sales, and that's going to be my entryway in. So I never thought of myself as purely a salesperson, right? And so I continue to carry those beliefs with me within a leadership capacity as well. So, but I've been at organizations where I go into somewhere and people have never worked with sales development, right? Like they've never had a sales development team before. They've never been in an organization that had sales development. And it's typically those folks who are like, I have no direct experience, who it's almost like there is this kind of very archaic form of sale, which is, the quote unquote telemarketing piece that's here. And it's like, you're just supposed to smile and dial the end, because that's all I know about sales development. Like their only true understanding is like from watching movies, and like movies, while it's a reflection of real life, it's not a carbon copy of real life. It's romanticized and at times, if anything, stereotyped in a very negative way. So I think it's like, if you're able to go in and ask questions as a rep, like, what are someone's true beliefs about sales development? How much agency and autonomy does an SDR have within this role to discover new channels? Walk me through a time where an SDR had a new idea. What was your response to it? How did you react to it? Did you support them at all? Right? Were you a steward of their ideas, or were you just saying no, absolutely not? So there's ways to really like be able to see like, how are people going to respond to these questions around like, what are their beliefs and how those beliefs show up in their environment?
Yeah. So I'm going to take this in a radical direction. Is that basically when I started in 2007 on phones, it was like early SaaS, software as a service. They taught me full cycle. There's like, here's a phone, here's a slide share, here's the demo, here's how you get the contract side, here's how you onboard, here's how you do the first week of training, here's how you teach them to use the software, and can you sit on, it was a primitive drift. It was a live person, which is now live person on a different direction than drift. Live person has definitely evolved. I'm not calling the live person product primitive, but at the time we didn't have the chat bot or the AI or it was just me sitting on the front of the website while I was doing a bunch of other things. So I got to do a lot of things, and I sponged that up, and I got really excited about entrepreneurship and Steve Blank and the epiphany. And so there's so much automation in ML. It's not going to take the jobs away. It's going to take a ton of the manual effort and analysis and research out of what SDRs do today, which means that those people can move down in the funnel and do more qualification, discovery, more selling. Right now, 36% of the time an SDR is selling, or a salesperson is selling. It's under 40%. That'll move 50%, 60%. Then they have more face-to-face, they're going to be able to carry a quota. They're going to look more like an AE. The structure is going to be more like an AE and an SE, and there's going to be account executives, and everyone's going to be more technical because the automation come in. But before that, we're going to see a lot of subspecialization of SDRs. There's 600,000 SDRs in tech. There's going to be about 2 million in 2-3 years. We're going to see tech stacks about 5 billion valuation. So there's about 500 sales tool vendors right now. That's going to explode to 5,000. All the vertical industries are going to be eaten by software as a service, which Mark Andreessen predicted in 1999. Software is eating the world. Yep. And what we're going to see is huge VC rounds because it's not much of an IPO. So, for example, IPO market, for example, Salesloft just raised 100 million. 40% of the rounds in 2019 were 100 million. Go look. It's kind of crazy. I remember the era of 2008-9, like 10 million was a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's because there's been issues with taking these private cultures and putting them in the public market. So there's going to be an explosion of SDRs, and they're going to have to redraw the lines of it. I just think that the SDRs right now toward 2025 will be the leaders of the revenue organizations 5 years from now.
Yep.
And if we rethink the fundamentals of the structure and design that limit the human, they really think about people, process, and technology and redrawing the silos of marketing, sales, and operations, and just thinking about great people who have aptitude and plugging them in across the full funnel, it will change. You're still asking, what do you do right now? That's fine, Justin. That's the futurist. What do I do now? It's communication. It's some of the stuff you're doing with like creating an internal, I don't know if you can talk about some of the wonderful things you're doing to help build communication collectives and talk about this stuff and rethink it. Otherwise, every company is just going to have the exact same SDR and AE, and it's going to be limited, so.
Okay, so here's what I really like. Here's what I believe is going to be. This is what I don't know how to put this. I'm going to get my words real quick. Here's what I feel like is the potential for sales development is, let's say there is a sales development leader, right? Like, you could have a chief revenue officer, right? I know there's everybody knows there's a VP of sales development. There's a few and far between. I've only seen 2 vice presidents of sales development, Lars Nielsen, and then I forgot what the guy's name is from Discover.org, or Zoom Info, whatever the company is called now. But those are the only 2 companies that I've seen have a VP of sales development, right? So I think number one, you're going to start seeing there's going to be a leader of sales development who's sitting at a C level, at the very least a VP level title. And then this person or the organization of sales development is going to be they're going to possess pipeline. They're that's going to be it. So, because what I got from like reading Predictable Revenue, right? Like this, so if that's like this is the initiation of the conversation, right? And it's going to mature and grow over time. And we're here now. It's like, the whole goal is we want to make sure that AEs, like the people who are closing, right? We want to make sure they're able to close so efficiently, so effectively. While at the same time, I don't know there's actually been a true acceptance of that kind of model of, hey, sales development reps are going to be the ones generating the pipeline. There's almost this like resistance towards sales leaders letting go of pipeline control. They're like, no, we have to own it. We have to have AEs do it. Like, whatever. And so there's all different types of reasons why. It's like, hey, like the financial model, it's super expensive. Look at CAC, look at this, look at that. And I'm like, all right, hey, at the end of the day, if you can't be halfway in, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But it's like, if we can start, so that being said, though, what is required of sales development is it can't just be 100 activities a day. It truly has to be, we need to equip people with the ability to have incredibly meaningful conversations. And that's going to be, right, that the relevance piece, it's going to be the personalization piece, it's going to be the business acumen. You almost have to be a thought leader. You don't have to be the kind of person who is having seminars and webinars and things like that, but you need to be at that exact same level of the thought leaders, right? So like if you can get your way to that, right, then it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of cultivation, but like within the sales development organization, you can create a teaching and a learning environment, or within the greater organization, we're going to have marketing, product, sales, right? Sales development, whoever it is, coming in and having a conversation around, hey, what are the true problems that we're solving? Like, what are we actually trying to do here? Like, what are the challenges? Not just the pains alone by themselves, but if you're able to cultivate expertise within the SDR seat. Like that to me is the next transformation of sales development. And that's when we start to see, oh, wow, like here's its next step, its next maturation of our go-to-market strategy where closers can just be incredibly effective at closing, right? And sales development truly owns, right? Isn't a support system to sales, but owns pipeline. So like that's my that's me on my white horse galloping through. And I recognize it takes a lot of work, but like that to me is like where I'm getting to. I was at SDR with my AE. I was like, listen, I'm really good at what I do. I'm really good at understanding how to be incredibly relevant, and you're really good at like closing. So like, let me be that person who knocks down the doors for you. Like, let me own your full on pipeline, and trust me, like if I'm number one, you're going to be number one too. So like, if we can, if there isn't like, there was work that got to that point, but I'm like, that to me is the next kind of operational challenge, I guess, or operational, like that's what needs to be operationalized is how can we like recruit for, hire people with that kind of mindset, true CEOs of their business, put them into the SDR seat, help them understand like what is my impact within the entire revenue system. If I'm not doing my job, my AE's not going to be doing so well, right? And then also like, what does it take for me to be a CEO of my book of business? And so like that to me is like if we can get that, plant that seed and let that grow, then the conversation around sales development would be totally different.
Yeah. So I really love how you just like hit 6 topics. I agree with all that. I mean, part of how I'm using my platform is to promote your platform. So how I rebalance the power is I have Beyond Sales Development, and thank you, Dave Delaney, where I feature the rep. Right, I have a show that's enterprise also, and we have a lot of diverse, awesome guests. But I love to go down to, the front line and take a radical look. And one thing I did on my teams when I ran global sales development teams or did for companies is let's move back off the metrics. What are we really trying to do? Well, yeah, we want to raise a round and we want to hit a revenue goal, but we want to create customers. And as Salesforce called it, CFL, Customers for Life, right? There's even a division. So the problem is that the SDR does a great job, has a great discovery call and thinks, maybe I'll listen more on this one. I'm kind of tired today. Let me just listen. And they start listening. Well, they don't make their 50 calls, but for a minute there, they're allowed to listen and have more empathy and really open it up to the conversation. And all of my methods speak to this. And suddenly they're on the phone for 20 minutes.
Yep.
Now they've missed all their activity metrics, but oddly, this person that they've listened for 20 minutes, like, I didn't want to buy anything, but I really trust you now, and I'm going to bring my whole team in. When we keep these metrics so high, we almost create a transactional outcome because we're creating this churn and burn factory, like a sausage grinder.
Yes.
So when I was running a team, I had these really crazy like game theory things where someone just figured out how to game the meeting metric. And they're hitting their number on the meeting metric, but that didn't go to opportunities. And so we didn't get many opportunities. We didn't get many that stuck in pipe or closed. So it's like SDR is killing their number, but no customers.
Yes.
So if the result of your organization is no customers, but you're still making a living, like for me, that's blood money. Like I don't want to get paid if I'm not creating customers because it's just like I'm cheating.
Yeah. So, there's some quote, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like, if you tell me the result, right, I'll show you the incentive. I don't know. I might have like completely butchered that, right? But like one of the things I recognize on myself is like I kind of think about, I process things in reverse. Like that's the most productive activity for me. So, for example, when I was in school, I'm like learning calculus, and the teacher would go up to the board and she'd walk through a linear process of, hey, here's the problem, here's how we solve it, right? So like, or here's the question, like let's get to the solution. And I couldn't follow along. I'd take all my stuff, all my notes. I would like go and Google it, right? And I'd have to actually start with the solution first and then work backwards. And that's how I actually would learn how to move forward from there. And so like there's conversations that I've been in where someone's like, oh, hey, well, SDR number one, sorry, it's not to make people seem like numbers, right? But it's like, hey, we have an SDR on the team who needs like 3 more opportunities to hit their number. And it's like, well, where are they at on their activities, right? Have they done, like, again, working off a capacity model? And I was like, we've done, like, I was like, because it's like, well, they're doing the activities and we're not getting the results. It's like, well, then it must not be the right capacity model. And I'm like, well, it's based off historical data. Like, I understand that last month's data might not actually be relevant today, right? It's a different situation. So, so even within that, it's like, how to put this, it can't just be quantitative, it has to be qualitative as well. And like, also, if we're only focused on the historical data, are we actually even exploring opportunities to innovate and get better and be more effective? So it's like, why don't we start off with the solution first, right? What is the desired outcome? It's not for SDRs in grand scheme of things, right? Like for sales development for leaders, it's not, oh, you generated 10 opportunities. It's more like, hey, AEs need X amount of pipeline coverage, right? Because if we're going to convert at this rate, and like for like in other organizations, I would say, how much of the pipeline do you want SDRs to cover? You want us to cover 60% of the pipeline? Okay, great. Like, what does that 60% mean? And then let's go and do that. And so there's going to be, of course, the activities, there's going to be the channels, there's going to be the technology to support that. But it's like, more than anything else, it's like, what is the true impact that we want the SDRs to make? And it's not just 10 opportunities. It's like, we want X amount of pipeline that's going to convert at this rate and generate these many customers and this kind of customer. And if we can align to that, right, and really focus on those key pieces, then I think we can start to like divert away from just activity for activity's sake.
Yeah. So one of the big things when I train teams is I work with these young reps. They're not always young, about business acumen.
Yes.
There's a lot of tactical stuff. I'm known to be this tactician, but I go dust off these dusty books. You know, I train them all on books that people see in the airport, maybe like Mastering the Complex Sell by Jeff Tull, or Jim Holden and Power-Based Selling, and stuff that they used to use at Oracle. You know, because that doesn't work anymore. It's modern. Like, people who are really good at getting their sales posts on LinkedIn are the ones that get it. I don't know about that. There's some really smart people that built some amazing companies that no one is talking about, and they wrote down their success in a book, in this magical little portal. So everybody I train is reading all these crazy books suddenly, and everything they're learning to open is they're learning out of strategic closing. You know, the politics of an organization, the power-based, competitive stuff, you know, business cases, reading annual reports, understanding how business works,
Yes.
profit and loss, accounting. The more and more you educate yourself, like, how can you be great at selling? I talked with Anthony Iannarino, like, you know, I know it's even political now to mention which one, but find a newspaper that you agree with and read the thing and read how businesses work and become fascinated and curious about how free market capitalism works and how business works. That's SDR training.
Yep.
And Scott Reese is big on this too. The best sales books aren't books. It's also about grit. Go rock climbing. Go get stuck in the snow. You know, like, it's a really comprehensive thing when you have human beings who are like clay, and they're young and they're curious and they want to learn, and we put them in a factory and we say, make a hubcap. And I just don't think that's the way to go. So if you can break the mold of your organization and try to make it less of a human in a factory, the less it feels like that. And I'm not saying like we're all in a factory, but we have a gong and beef jerky. Like, I mean, it actually has to be like mission driven. They have to be feeling like they're creating something, or they're educating themselves, and there's enablement. So I just, this could be a really good job, even in the broken current system. And I know you're doing that where you're working. You're optimizing within an inefficient system, and you're bringing a heart-centered approach. And I just really admire you for that. So holding these conversations is the key. The first step is awareness. I mean, is the emperor wearing clothes? I mean, is the legacy system of software as a service sales marketing operations that was created 20 years ago that we all, like, mass hallucination, just follow? Does that mean it works? I mean, should we question it? Should we question all the, I mean, that is what made Aaron Ross incredible, is he questioned it. But now his techniques have become the Bible of Silicon Valley scaling, and now we have an industrial complex around SDR AE. So this needs to be shattered in the 2020s in order for everyone to grow, which takes us back to the conversation.
There's, if I mean, I talk about this with my team. I go to therapy all the time. Freaking love it. My therapist's name is Ralph. He's a dope dude. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is evolution, right? And what does evolution mean? And so just because, like, we have come to a certain point in our lives and it works, right? Think about in the professional context, like, just because we have this system, this predictable revenue system that has worked, is like, is that all there is to it, or is there more, right? So, and what kind of prompted even this conversation to begin with, right? Thinking about what we're seeing on Capitol Hill, which it's like, it seems like there's like a battle or a war of maintaining traditions rather than actually allowing for an evolution to happen and to occur. So it's like, I think there's a piece here. The question is, it's like almost, hey, how can we take the best of the traditions that we've learned? Like, how can we take the best from the lessons that we've learned and the insights that we've gained, but then transform that into wisdom? It's not just, hey, I'm just going to follow this belief because my mom said I should do it, because my leader said I should do it, whatever, because I read it in a book, but more so, how can we take ownership of what we're learning and then express that in a way that's incredibly authentic to ourselves? And then also allow, this is a big piece, and there's a question here from Liz, right? I think that that aligns to this, right? Like, what can I do as an ally? What can I, how can I be a leader for my team and the peers? Is, hey, listen, me personally, I have a form of expression that is that's going to be authentic to me. And also I need to ensure that my authentic expression of myself and my beliefs and my views and my ideas doesn't cannibalize the authentic expression of other people, right? Like, that to me is like, that's how I can be a leader. That's how I can be a peer, or an honest peer. It's not so much, oh, hey, I have to be the one with the idea specifically, the end. It's just more so to say, I know I have an idea and I know I want to share that authentically. And so I would imagine that a lot of other people do. How can I be a person who creates and holds space for the ideas of other people without taking anything personally? Like, but we can coexist and our ideas can coexist at the same time.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first step is conversations like this. I work for myself, so I understand I get to say things that are a third rail. I'm inclusive and diplomatic about what I say because I'm here to improve the software as a service industry and improve conditions in the fourth industrial revolution for workers, for sellers, for marketers, for operations folks. There are elements that are broken. A lot of the things I poke at are flaws inherently in free market capitalism. I can't fix the nature of money and society and economics, but I certainly, if I were running an SDR team, or if I were running an inside sales team, or just a sales team, and I had the budget and I controlled the thing, I would take as many risks in the interests of the employees. I would look at the pawns on the chessboard, and I'm not trying to redistribute all the power, but what you're actually doing is, that's not a pawn. You have a unique genius of every person on the team, and it's an opportunity cost. You're actually not leveraging your team to the fullest extent. Mm-hmm. Someone in a silo, it's convenient for you, and you don't have to change the comp plan, and you don't have to redraw it all or get different software, but you're making less revenue. The great irony is the exact goal you have to really crush your number and get funded increases if you hire diversity. From a diversity perspective, increases if you let people contribute extracurricularly to the job description. So that's the great irony of my work, is that if you try it, you actually grow faster. Yep. It's in the interest of the power base to do what I'm saying. He wants to blow up SDR, and he's rogue. He's like the Ayn Rand of the space. Well, but actually, you make more money. That's what's crazy about all this. And I love these conversations with you about it. I talked to Nikki Ivey about that. I talked to Kevin Dorsey about that, and just grateful to be on the show.
Now, honestly, so grateful to have you here. And I know we're at the hour as well. We used to have every single minute. Okay, good job, Justin. So I'll have to have you back, because I'm sure we can have so many conversations all the time. So yeah, just thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks again, Gabrielle. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming in.